I like to think that it's become abundantly clear during the tenure of our relationship that I love food, and as such, food is a huge part of the show. And it will always be a huge part of the show because food to me is such an important part of travel. Food breaks down barriers, language, religion, race, culture, ethnicity, everything. It's a shared experience. It's one of the very, very few things that we all do as a species. We have to, and it's one of the few things that we can all do together and share and understand in one form or another, even if we can't communicate. I think that it's also the fastest way to understand a people, a culture, a country, a city, experiencing what they eat and how and where and when and with whom. That says so much about a culture. And I think it's a great way to break through the touristy veneer of a city and really experience the essence and the soul of wherever it is you find yourself. And street food is the best representation of that idea, in my opinion, because it's what fuels a city. It's of the moment and it's of the environment in which it finds itself as well. It's hyper local. You can try a dish at one stall in a city and then move 2 blocks in any direction and have that same dish, and it will taste totally different and be a totally different experience as well because of who made it and how that recipe was passed down, the water source, the ingredients, the style, the flair. It doesn't mean that one's better than the other. It just means that it's different. It's a reflection of that neighborhood, of that person, of that family. And I think that's so powerful and so important. And that's why, not only because I love to eat, but I think that's why this is such a big part of the show. And it's also why when we're filming, we gravitate towards street food almost invariably. Yes, it's lovely to be able to sit down and have those epic, fancy, never-ending meals, and those are wonderful in and of themselves. And maybe we'll talk about that in another video. But for me, street food is a very powerful representation of the city, and we've had some extraordinary meals from street food vendors across the world. So it was very, very difficult to come up with my top 5. Or actually, Greg and I came up with this list together, and he reminded me of some that I'd completely forgotten about, or that were so good that they just blinded me with their awesomeness. But I'll do my best to go through these top 5 and maybe mention a few that didn't quite make the top 5 but are worthy of an honorary mention. The first one was from one of our earliest episodes in Dubai. We worked with Arva from Frying Pan Adventures. She went with her sister, this wonderful food tour and food heritage company in the UAE, and introduced us to many wonderful foods in Dubai. But the one that just captured our imagination and that I've been craving, and I think Greg's even tried to make himself with pretty good results from what I can understand, is the Almani breakfast roll. Now, this is a little bit of legend in Dubai. It's the UAE's soul food, and it's a very, very new invention. Legend has it that it was invented or created by schoolboys in the 80s and 90s. It's simply a parota, like an Indian-style flaky flatbread, which are divine in of themselves. And on it is added, get ready for this, scrambled egg, hyper-processed American-style cheese, hot sauce, maybe a couple of other things, but the single most important ingredient are these Almani chips, or crisp potato chips, which are then scrumpled up into almost crumbs and then put over the rest of the parota before it's rolled up and given to you. I don't think had a more satisfying street food breakfast in all my travels. It sounds so basic, it sounds so simple and almost gross, but it's just so delicious, and it's important that they are this very specific brand of potato chips. This is something that Arva told us, and then the research I did for this little video has led me to understand that this is not up for debate. This particular brand of spicy potato chip is not up for debate. You have to use this, and that's what makes it. When I took my family to Dubai a few years ago, I had the pleasure of having lunch with Arva and her husband, and I said, "Can you please tell me where we got those Almani breakfast rolls?" This was in Old Dubai. And she said, "Oh yeah, I can't drop a pin on a map because this part of Old Dubai is not really mapped, but if you go down this alley and walk 50 steps and then turn right and look for the guy with this t-shirt on and then take 6 steps to your left, knock 4 times on the door," there was no way I was going to find it again. So I have been craving them ever since, but that is just one of the best breakfast street foods I've ever had. This may feel like a little bit of a cop-out, this next one, saying tacos in Mexico City. Now, as a quasi-Californian, I like to think that my pedigree for tacos is very, very high. We're very lucky in California to have the quality of Mexican and Mexican-American food that we do. I have never experienced tacos like I've had in Mexico City. We met up with Nico Garcia, who is a food tour guide and cook and just enthusiast of the Navarrete area, especially their food scene, and took us to 2 absolutely legendary places. The first was Il Vilcito, which is amazing because of what it is, let alone what it serves. By day, it's an auto mechanic shop. And then around 8 o'clock at night, it transforms into the single best tacos al pastor joint in all of Mexico City. There's so much to love about that story in and of itself. Il Vasito means little vial. It's a play on their original name, which was in itself a play on a huge taco chain, I guess, in Mexico City that didn't take kindly to this upstart little taqueria using its name. So they changed the name to Il Vasito. It's the best tacos al pastor I've ever had. Tacos al pastor are actually pretty interesting. They're a very recent invention. They were created by Lebanese immigrants to Mexico, the children of Lebanese immigrants to Mexico in the 60s and 70s. They took the classic shawarma meat on a vertical spit and thought, well, let's do this with pork and add all of the flavors and influences that we find around us here in Mexico and Mexico City and create the single greatest taco dish of all time. And it's pork with a rub with the pineapple on top, and as it bakes or roasts, the pineapple juices roll down the spit and add this sort of citrusy flavor, this poke to it. It's wonderful. They slice it off the spit right onto the tortilla itself. You get a little fleck of the pineapple that's been roasting on the top. I love them. I love them so much. They're really, really easy to screw up and make dry. You know when it's good, when it's crispy on the outside, lovely and moist and juicy on the middle. I love them. And just around the corner from Il Vasito is Tacos Tony, which is open, I think, 20 hours a day.
It's easier for me to tell you when these guys are closed than when they're open. So Tony's closes from 5 a.m. till 8 a.m.
Little stand in the middle of a roundabout also in Navarrete. And they do suadero tacos, which I'd never had before. And it's a cut similar to brisket, which is cooked for hours and hours and hours in this oil bath. So it almost is like confit at the end of it. And you have this beautiful brisket taco with this potent, spicy, really spicy salsa. And I'd never had anything like that in my life. Of course, you can get brisket tacos all over the place, but that reaction, the breaking down of the meat, and then the kind of the almost deep frying in a way of the brisket was just incredible. And I have tried, it's very hard to find, I think, outside of Mexico City, maybe even beyond Mexico, but it's one of the places that I always end up going back to. So, I mean, tacos in Mexico City is just a religious experience. It's why I went back 4 times in 1 year for the food, frankly. Falafel. I think I underestimated falafel. I know I did. I never really appreciated it because I'd always had those mealy, dry, probably frozen examples that you find added to the end of a menu at an urban cafe to add a little bit of kind of Mediterranean and Middle Eastern flair. It's always disappointing. It sounds good on paper, but the falafel that I had in Beirut was literally life-changing for me, because I had taken something that I'd written off as bland and uninspired and made it one of my favorite dishes of all time. The chap that provided them for us, that made it, he is a master falafel chef. He'd been doing it for years. He eats them every single day, never gets tired of them, because the composition of the falafel changes based on the ingredients and the provenance and the seasons, and then how you prepare it as a sandwich, and then what you put in that sandwich changes. And we were in Beirut, walking down one of the most, the roads where you've got all kinds of different shops, and then a bombed out building, and then another shop, and then a bombed out car. There's a legacy of Beirut's past. We talked about that at length in the episode. But there was this row of falafel shops, and we went to one very particularly. And this was a choice. It's not like, oh, let's just go to this one. And most falafel is an intensely regional thing. As you move around the sort of Levantine culture, the greater Middle East, I guess up towards the Mediterranean to an extent, it changes. It's very, the origins of it are very, very delicate and not worth getting into in a video like this. But as you move around that broader area, they change a lot in their composition. Lebanese falafel is made mainly with chickpeas, but in some areas it's made more with fava beans. Some areas add a lot of cilantro, which is why you get that beautiful green tint. I don't know if one is better than the other, but the Beirut falafel was so good and fresh and hot and crispy. And then with the sandwich components, with a little bit of pickle and some mint and hummus, and oh my gosh, so satisfying and pretty good for you all. I know it's deep fried, but the rest of it's satiating and wonderful. And I've wanted to learn so much more about it, and then go all over the greater Middle East and eat more of them. Many, many, many more of them. Jianbing. Shanghai was revelatory. Everywhere I go is revelatory when it comes to food. But I didn't really know what to do in Shanghai. Having grown up in Hong Kong, it's a very different experience. They're thousands of miles away from each other. Protocol, etiquette, what's good, what's local, what's seasonal, what to avoid at all costs. Didn't really know what I was doing at all. So I'm so glad that I got in touch with Kyle, who's one of the co-founders of Untour Food Tours, and he was very generous with his time and expertise. We mainly spent time in the former French concession, which is just a lovely place. I really enjoyed my time there, in all of Shanghai, but particularly in that part. And he introduced us to Jianbing, which is going to rival the Almani rolls for the best breakfast street food that I've experienced. Jianbing is really from Shandong province, which is north of Shanghai, but you can find it all over China, and is particularly popular in Shanghai. It is a millet grain pancake, which is prepared very similarly to a crepe. And in it is added an egg, which is cracked onto the pancake, mixed up a little bit. And then you have green onion, cilantro, coriander, pickled mustard tubers for a little bit of the crunch. A soybean paste is spread on, and some chili paste. And then the pièce de résistance, how you finish it, is there's a fried wonton placed in the middle of it, and then it's all wrapped up, put in a bag for you to walk and munch. So you've got everything you would want in a street food dish. You've got salt, sweet, spicy, crunchy, the astringent, lovely astringent flavoring from the pickled tubers. They are so good, and they cost like 60 US cents. So you can eat like 17 or 18 of them for the cost of a cup of Starbucks coffee. There is a place in London if you are from London or over here, when things get back to normal, called Pleasant Lady John Bing. You can find them in Soho as well as some of the markets. And they do a pretty good job. They add lamb and a few other things, some pork. It's really good. It scratches the itches. It's nothing compared to the lady we found quite literally in a closet in the French concession. But such a great food. So fresh and crispy and crunchy. The lady, we went back the next day, Greg and I, because we wanted more of it, and she wasn't there. So it was at her whim when she decided to create these beautiful, beautiful breakfast bites. Finally, hornado. I'd never had Ecuadorian food before, let alone hornado. And Greg and Jumi, who we met up with in Queens, which is still one of the places I think about the most from all of the places that we've traveled to, because the food was incredible. The diversity was like nowhere I had ever been before in my life. And Greg and Jimmy are experts on the region and particularly on the cuisine. So we walked all over the place. But we ended at this food truck right under the subway line there, and I still think about this dish. It's Ecuadorian, it's pork, and traditionally you marinate the pork in chicha, which is a fermented corn drink, for days and days and days. And then you bake the pork in a wood-burning clay oven. This is how it's done in Ecuador in all of the markets, and actually particularly in the highlands. I don't know how these guys in the food truck did it. I kind of don't care, because whatever they did was transcendent. You get all this sort of shredded pork, and in a thick piece of crunchy, what we would call crackling here, chicharron almost, and a potato puck, almost patty, some vegetables just to take up space, and then you finish it with this super spicy, tangy sauce, almost salsa, on top of it. And that was is it the best pork I've ever had? It might be the best pork I've ever had in my life. And it was like $6. You crack open an Ecuadorian beer, and you stand and we watch the 7 go by on a warm Queens summer night. And that was the perfect way to end what had been an incredibly satisfying tour of Queens with Greg and Jumi, who do wonderful food tours. I strongly recommend that you look them up. So a couple that didn't make the top 5, but would probably have made the top 5 if I'd done this any other day. Takoyaki. Takoyaki are a dish that you find in Osaka. You can find them all over Japan, but they are from Osaka. They were invented in Osaka. And they are little balls, little dumplings, for want of a better word, that are filled with octopus. Chopped up octopus, and they're prepared in this dish, which is specifically created for takoyaki. It's like this divoted metal tray. The batter is poured in, the octopus is added, and then when they get to a certain point, the artists that make them take a little stick, almost like a skewer, and flick them over so that they all rotate. And you are served maybe 8 to 12 of them in a pile. There's a savory sauce that's drizzled over them, and some mayonnaise, and then on top of it, they shave bonito flakes, dried bonito fish flakes, which then kind of dance in the heat of the takoyaki. It's captivating, totally mesmerizing, and then you break them open and let some of the lava from inside escape until you can eat them without needing a trip to the emergency room. I took my family to Osaka a few years ago, and my son, who was 7 at the time, I kind of jokingly suggested that he try these things, because when you describe something like that to a normal 7-year-old, they would be utterly repulsed. But he sat down at this stall in Osaka. I ordered him a full serving, like 9, 10, 11, 12 of these things, and he destroyed them. By the time he had finished, there was a crowd gathered around this little American English kid, just chowing down on a bowl of octopus balls, and he still talks about them and demands them. They're a little harder to find over here, but Amazing food. Another Japanese one that didn't make the list that I love as well, which we talked about in the Osaka episode, is the legendary Lawson Egg Sandwich. You have had an egg sandwich. We've all had egg sandwiches. I don't know what Lawson do to their particular egg sandwiches, but they have legions of fans all over the world, including people like Anthony Bourdain, who when he did his Okinawa episode, you can tell he went totally off script, saw Lawson, went into it, and made them film him getting one and describing the virtues of this wonderful sandwich.
Glorious, glorious sandwich.
There's nothing special about them. The packaging is really bland. They look like nothing, but you bite into it and you understand immediately. The bread is unusually sweet, but not in a gross kind of way. There's salty egg filling, maybe a little bit of crack. I don't know what it is, but I jones for them. Like when I leave Haneda Airport, there is a Lawson in the departure area of Haneda Airport, and I get like 5 of them to eat on the airplane, and everybody looks at me like, he knows what he's doing. He knows what he's doing. Yeah, so those are something I miss intensely because you cannot get them outside of Japan. And don't let anybody tell you that they're all the same from all the convenience stores. It's just not